In the high stakes worlds of law and commerce, partnerships and understanding are critical, yet gaps remain between these interconnected fields. Join us as we sit down with industry leaders to highlight how collaboration can make impact. This is Bridging the Gap. Kesha Hodge Washington has been active in the city of Phoenix, District 8, for over 20 years. She has and continues to volunteer and serve in many areas, from voter registration and civic engagement to providing food and basic necessities to individuals in need. The current issues facing District 8 require an intentional, strategic, and comprehensive approach. She moved to Arizona from the United States Virgin Islands in 1999 and has been active in Phoenix ever since. The daughter of a mechanic and a bookkeeper, Kesha is a first-generation college graduate who earned her bachelor's degree from the University of the Virgin Islands and her law degree from Arizona State University College of Law. Kesha is a former assistant attorney general who practiced law in Phoenix for 20 years. After graduating from law school, she clerked at the Arizona Court of Appeals for Honorable Cecil B. Patterson, and then as a senior law clerk to Honorable Maurice Portley. She served as assistant attorney general working to protect children in physically and sexually abusive environments, was later appointed special deputy attorney general to investigate and prosecute election law violations by former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and routinely provided free representation to tenant families and individuals facing eviction. Kesha also successfully represents consumers getting ripped off by big insurance companies who, after collecting years of premiums, refuse to pay out the promised benefits. Her 20 years of experience in law firm, government practice, and in-house settings have given Kesha valuable insight on how to effectively achieve results. Kesha has always been determined. She has always put that determination into action in courtrooms and in her work to raise scholarship money for high school and college students, mentor young women, and provide free legal services to those in need. Kesha is active with a number of organizations, including Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Cotton Fields Homeowners Association, and the American Bar Association. Kesha is a professional problem solver, lawyer, consensus builder, and a passionate leader committed to the constructive development of our community. Never one to sit on the sideline, Kesha believes in leading by example and is ready to zealously advocate for District 8 and bring a fresh perspective and innovative solutions to Phoenix City Council. Please join me in welcoming the first Black woman to sit on the City Council in Phoenix, Arizona, attorney Kesha Hodge Washington.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Sorry, I made this like 4-point font and for some reason thought my 41-year-old eyes could handle it. Trying to save paper, save the trees, so can't do that again.
You know
what? Well, it's good to see you. Last time I saw you was Juneteenth.
Yeah.
So it was great to see you out at that event. So it's nice to see someone who actually shows up to events in the community. I just wanted to say that. You don't have to worry about her being on vacation while Hawaii is on fire. You feel me? All right. Pre-law.
Yes.
What made you decide to pursue a career in law? And how did you know it was the right path for you?
So my decision to pursue a career in law, I would say probably was formed when I was probably 11 or 12. I know it sounds really weird, but at that age, I wrote a prospectus on what I wanted my life to look like. And it was actually an assignment I had to do. And it was about incorporating the things that you thought you were good at and what skill set matched up with those. And I wrote I wanted to be a lawyer, and I came back home and I had researched everything that was entailed. I was talking to my parents about it, and they were like, that is absolutely the right decision for you. You're an advocate. And I love to reason, and not, my parents didn't call it arguing. They call it reason. I needed to understand why things were the way they were. And I was always, my brother is 4 years older than me, but I would always be the one defending or trying to explain why he should not get the punishment he deserved, or we shouldn't be punished collectively. I was always negotiating of some sort. So
okay.
I've always had an interest in making sure that the rules were applied in a manner consistent to everyone. So I guess, and to me, that's what the law represents, is the application of rules to our broad society. So that's how I know it's been the right path for me. I've been on the path Now 21 years. It's funny to still say that, but it's been an interesting path, and it's one I've had the opportunity to see a wide spectrum of what the legal profession includes, and I think it's been the right decision for me. So I've been enjoying it.
Perfect. Do you have any advice to give to a pre-law student on how to best prepare for law school? You got into Arizona State. That's not an easy school to get into. So, what are your tips and tricks?
I don't know if I have tips and tricks. I think it's just about I think law school requires a showing of commitment and diligence. And I think, unfortunately, one of the ways they do that is by looking at your grades. So I would say focus on your grades. They also look at your community involvement. How are you as an individual? Because I think one skill set that is very much needed as an attorney, but there's really no way to gauge it, is your interpersonal skills. And I think they gauge that from your community input and your public service or your community service or the organizational work that you do and leadership skills. So I think most lawyers are inherently leaders, and I think they look at how you develop those relationships in undergrad and how that would translate to law school. So I would also suggest do some logic puzzles so that you can do score pretty well on your LSAT, so you can increase your odds that way.
Awesome. Moving on to law school.
Yes.
What study habits or tips do you recommend for excelling in those law school classes? And how did you approach preparing for exams?
One tip that I wish I had incorporated earlier is actually reviewing outlines ahead of the um, exam period. So just looking at the information ahead of time, even though I didn't, as you probably gathered as a first year, you probably don't understand a lot of what the outline is saying. But what I think is important is how the outline is laid out. I think it helps form your understanding of how the class will go, and find out what's important for those teachers. So that's the one thing I wish I had done a few. I figured that out by my second semester of my as a 1L, but I should have learned. I think I probably would have benefited if I had done that a little earlier. And the tips I would definitely recommend for excelling is just being consistent. Um, Set a time that you're going to focus on your schoolwork. I treat it like a job. I did, whether it was 8 to 3 or whatever time frame I had. I would set aside for school, and I would set aside for my assignment. Treat it like a job. That's how I prepared for. I had to take the California. Not had to. I chose to take the California bar. 18 years after I finished law school. And as you know, the California bar is one of the more difficult bar examination, and I had not taken a bar exam in a while, but I was able to pass it the first time. And I think it's because I treated studying for it like a job. Whereas I set aside time every day. It wasn't a full 8 hours, but I set aside time diligently to review topics, ensure that I was best prepared for the examination. So I think once you just treat it consistently, I mean, for me, it was like, I want to put the work in now so that I can pass it. I don't have to do it again. So same thing for law school. Put the work in, figure out what works for you. If you need 4 hours, set aside your 4 hours, or even if you only get 3.5, you're still better off than if you weren't able to do what you were going to do. So be consistent.
Awesome. Do you feel like class ranking really matters for finding a job after graduation?
Okay, I might say something controversial. I don't necessarily think class ranking really matters for finding a job after graduation. I really think it is important, but I think the most important component in finding a job after graduation is your interpersonal skills and the relationships that you have established while in law school and before law school. It's a lot of this, as in most worlds, it is about who do you know, who do you connect with, who can vouch for you. So I think grades are important, but I also believe your relationships are way more important. I think networking is an under utilized skill by many.
Knowing what you know now, would you have done anything different?
I wouldn't have stressed as much over my grades. I would have focused more on the retention of the information and the application, not just regurgitation of the rules, but understanding it. I also, like I said, I would have focused more on reviewing the outlines before I got into the class versus waiting until more of examination period. And I probably would have developed more relationships with more of my law school professors. I mean, there were some I naturally gravitated to, and I think I developed relationships with those versus I kind of neglected those that I didn't have a relationship with. And in hindsight, it might have been beneficial to expand my relationship beyond the teachers that I did, the professors that I did.
Did you do any extracurriculars or clinics? Do you have any recommendations?
Yes, so I did at ASU. We had the civil practice clinic. I did that as well as the mediation clinic. When I started, and I would recommend clinics to any law student because I think it's a great application of the book knowledge that you're learning to actually have to implement that and use the skill sets in an environment that replicates or looks like the real world law practice is invaluable. The civil practice clinic is an opportunity where I think it's Rule 33, where law students can practice in the state of Arizona under the guidance of a lawyer. So it was actually you now stepping into the role as a lawyer while still in law school. And it gave me tremendous insight on things that you don't learn in school, like crafting correspondence to opposing counsel to your clients, making sure they're kept aware. It's about civil procedure. You learn how when motions are due, but what does it really look like to e-file them or to have them served or to have them challenge your discovery? How do you go through discovery responses? Like those are the things that you get to learn in a clinic that you would not necessarily learn or apply in a traditional just classroom setting. And I also took mediation clinic because I do believe that many times most people come to lawyers because they have a dispute, and not everything necessarily has to be litigated or documented in a transactional agreement. I think we can also mediate many of the disputes that we have. So I truly enjoyed my my mediation clinic, and I recommend it to anyone. Most law schools have varying types of clinics. I know ASU also had a criminal practice clinic if you were interested in that line of work. So I think the clinic is it's a great way to get real world application. I know many times law school focuses on extracurricular being on law journal of some sort, but law journal is great. It's a great component to research. But if you're talking about, to me, if you're talking about the application of the law and how to practice as a real lawyer, I think clinics win that race hand down. So
Okay. Okay, let's move on to mental health.
oh.
What self care or stress management techniques were most helpful for you as a law student?
For me, mental health and stress management is really just taking time for me. So it would be figuring out some way to set aside time for myself, whether or not that's simply taking a walk in the afternoon away from everybody just to kind of clear my head when I feel overwhelmed. And also making sure I was eating well and getting enough sleep. Um, Trying to balance everything as it were and just stressing about everything else that was going on. I think I was losing a lot of sleep because I was anxious about the whole newness of law school, especially especially with law school being on a curve in most cases, not truly giving you the grade you deserve. It gave an intense level of competition that sometimes I think is unhealthy. So I would definitely say you need to focus on your physical and mental health because nothing else matters if you're not in a good place right there.
And how big was your 1L class?
My 1L class was almost 200 individuals.
Yeah, so that's a lot of bodies.
Yes. um, and from a diversity standpoint, we were part of the largest African American class that ASU had, and it was less than 10 of us at that time. So I came from I went to HBCU, so I came from a predominantly minority or school to go into a predominantly white institution, and that in itself had its own complexities. So um, I definitely sometimes you feel like there was, in addition to the external competition, you have the internal competition where you're competing. You feel like you have to prove that you're qualified to be here. So
I resonate with that. At the school I'm at now, there are six of us, three males, three females, which is the
Mhm.
largest they've
Mhm.
ever had. And we're sitting at 90 for us.
Yeah, we were at 7.
Yeah, unsurprisingly. Okay, networking and career. So you touched upon this a little bit, and so we'll expand upon it more. How important is networking for career development in the legal field, but also when should the law students start reaching out, trying to build those connections?
I think as soon as possible. That's one thing I wish I had learned earlier. And I think a lot of it came with, as mentioned in my bio, I'm first generation college, so I'm first generation law school as well. And I really didn't have a framework of understanding how significant networking is in our development as lawyers. I came from a more Pollyanna type of mentality. You work hard, you get the good grade, and you get the job. Like it automatically follows that way. I've later learned that yeah, you work hard, you get the grades, but sometimes it really comes down to who can vouch for you because everybody will look great on paper. So I would definitely recommend starting networking as soon as possible. The one thing I would tell you also is you don't have to like I felt sometimes some pressure when I networked um to almost be cautious in sharing what I didn't know because I didn't want things people have expectations that I should know information. I think what I've learned now, and when I talk to 1Ls or people who are thinking about law school, is just go with your natural curiosity. Speak to individuals that you have a shared common interest in. Find out what they do, because a lot of it. A lot of it really just is about interconnecting with that person as an individual, not necessarily what door they can open for you. You may not be in the same field, but you'll be surprised that that person may have colleagues in that field and be like, "Oh, have you heard about this opportunity?" I'll tell them to keep an eye out for you, or it's really just about network with individuals. We tend to network with people who are what we think are close and closely aligned to the interests that you have. And I've sometimes found that that necessarily isn't always the end all be all. I've found that I've been able to establish relationships with individuals outside of my realm, and that has helped open doors for me. So even to like run in for office, individuals or people whose path I have crossed years ago became influential, very helpful as I was navigating this path later on. So it's just about finding people who you can connect with and making sure that you present your authentic self and they feel like they can trust you and they can vouch for you and they will continue to do so. I mean, that's what networking is about, meeting people who will say nice things about you, who will. So.
That's awesome. Okay, the future of law. How do you see technology like AI and automation changing the practice of law in the coming years?
I definitely see it taking a role, especially in things that have been considered like form pleadings. And actually, I did see, I can't remember what it's called. There is a specifically AI for the legal field because I actually toyed with downloading it, and I was like, let's not go down the rabbit hole. But I do see technology being an integral part of the legal field, especially in areas like document review. I use a lot of electronic document review. I use technology really well right now to do that. And I think you'll see automation, like I said, in preparing like your form discovery or preparing your exhibit list, things that are more routine types of tasks. I think least start will start off with some level of automation. Of course, you'll then personalize it in the transactional world because you'll have to adjust it for the actual party's needs and what the expectations are. But I do think it's going to help the legal field become more streamlined and reduce some of the costs. That's one of the inhibitors of the legal practice, and I think that will help cut the costs and make the legal world a little more affordable to the everyday person.
Perfect. Bridging the gap. In your experience, what misunderstandings exist between law and other professions, and how can mutual understanding be improved?
Hmm. That's a great question. One of the misunderstandings I see that exists between the law and other professions is I think it's more of a misunderstanding of what the law represents. Like when you say like a common law or what's reasonable, many times other professions have an idea that it should be a straightforward black and white rule. And as you know, the law doesn't really operate that way. It applies usually a reasonable person standard. And I think that that understanding can be improved by just simply by having the discussions about why that is the way it is. And that's because it's trying to account for human behavior, and human behavior, it depends on what the other circumstances are. So for example, like I'll give the example of running a red light. Running a red light on its face is normally a bad thing, but if somebody is running a red light to evade someone that's pursuing them on a negative, it's not a bad thing. And I think that's one of the things people have to understand about the law. It's not, I think the law gets a negative stigma from when you see people think of it as, especially in these larger verdicts, jury verdicts that seem a little detached from reality, that they don't see the everyday application of the law. So it's about how do we have more of those conversations and not just the headline stories that you see about the law. And I think the other importance of the law, I think, is the law does a really good job of capturing our history. And I know that sounds weird to say it, but our the law or the legal cases, we hear about it for especially like the Plessy versus Ferguson's or the Brown versus Board of Education. But there's also, for example, legal cases and depositions have been like a key in filling out ancestry.com. So people understanding who were ownership rights and who were there. Like they're a source of such great information as well. So the law, I think, is just a dynamic body. So
Yeah, very much so. Okay, let's get into Attorney General.
yes,
All right, your previous life.
yes.
So, what led you to pursue that? Because I remember when we spoke, you were saying you'd also done like banking as well. Like
Mhm.
you've kind of done different areas. How did you then get sucked into the attorney general's office?
Well, actually, I went to the Attorney General's office after I clerked at the Court of Appeals, at the Arizona Court of Appeals. And I went there because it offered for me what I thought a really good mix. I was in the Policy Trainings and Appeals Division. I really was drawn to that because I think policy is how you make the change. The training is like, how do I train other attorneys to effectuate the policies that we want, and then the appeals, like if something went wrong, how do we fix it? So that's really why I went into that field. And it was also, I did child protective services primarily. And at the time, we had a high influx, so what I consider a high influx of children that were experiencing physical and mental and sexual abuse. And it was, for me, it just felt like that's why I went to law school, so I can help protect those that are less fortunate than myself. And it just felt like it was an opportunity for me to do good. It also was an opportunity, as you can imagine. It's highly emotional, very taxing on your psyche. So it definitely requires a special person to do so. I did it for about 3 years. And I tell people my angel wings burnt off. I became way too vested in the cases that I was concerned that that I needed to do something else. But it was one of the best experiences that I had in that area. I also, I was also named a special, and we mentioned this in my bio for the attorney for Maricopa County Sheriff's Office dealing with election fraud. I'm sorry, election law violation. I shouldn't call it election fraud. It's election violations, and that is also it was also an interesting time. It was an ability. I was still learning about how the election contribution limits, and it was just about showing how we can take a rule and how it can be manipulated in a manner that then violates the intent of the rule. So it was about in those situations, there really it's not something that's glamorous. It's not like a traditional like criminal cases, but at the end of the day, a violation is a violation, and it still must be corrected because if someone is contributing money to a campaign, it should go to the effort that they want it to go to. So it was again trying to be a voice for those that otherwise would not have had a voice. So that's one of the greatest things I think about working as the Attorney General's office is you normally have a really good client because your client is the public and you're the face of and you're the advocate for the public to ensure that their rights are protected.
And so, did all of the public appreciate your work in figuring out whether or not Sheriff Joe was culpable?
I wouldn't say all of them, but I think the vast majority of the people agreed with the work. And he was and he remains a controversial figure in Maricopa County, and yes, I think most it was definitely just about making sure it was your funds were being used for what you contributed them for, not for something else.
Yeah, the super PAC.
Yes.
And so, with these skills, just a little bit before we transition to the next one, what lessons or skills from these experiences have proven valuable in your current role on the city council?
Oh, I would say the greatest one is probably the ability to consensus build, like to see beyond the problem and see how we can come to a solution together. Like making sure that both sides or all sides feel like I've heard them and I'm taking bits and pieces from their concerns and coming up with a solution that works for everybody. Or that is the aim. So I think that is because I think our community, our society, our city are made up of different interpretation, different philosophies on how things should work. And I think a lot of people feel sometimes that government and their elected officials don't listen to them, and two, don't incorporate what they hear. And of course, you can't incorporate everything, but if you the more you incorporate, people feel like a sense of ownership and agreeability with what you have, you tend to have a stronger support for your program or your policy. So I think that is probably one of the greater lessons. And I think the lessons that I learned at the AG's office and just understanding the effects and how you create policy and how the policies trickle down and how do you get buy-in for your policies, and the negotiating and mediation skill set I've learned has been tremendous in my role as city council.
Okay. Keisha for Phoenix. All right, let's talk about all things District 8. So, like I said, you are the first Black woman to
Mhm.
ever be elected to a city
Yep.
council position in Phoenix. And then also, apparently, you have I don't know what you guys call it, district mate. I don't know what you call each other. We have a Black man too. So, this is the first time in history we've had a Black man and a Black woman simultaneously
Yes.
doing their thing. Very exciting. So happy to be in the presence of Black excellence and all things Black girl magic. So, what motivated you to transition from law of, I guess we could say, public service as well, doing the attorney general thing, but then to the city, city council?
Um, I really think it came down to I saw a need for a shift in the way we were handling some things and from a city perspective. And I just felt like it was really easy to sit on the sideline and complain about what you didn't like. But in order to actually make effective and meaningful changes, you needed to get off the sideline. And I felt like I couldn't be the only one that felt that we needed a change in the direction we were going. And I felt like I felt like I really want to be part of the solution. I don't want to be part of the complainers. I don't want to be part of those that are just identifying public. I say problem identification is easy. Solution, problem solving is where the work begins. And I wanted to be a part of I wanted to do the work, especially my 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 passion is helping the unsheltered, those individuals that are struggling in this day and age. And I think the pandemic really intensified it for us, as many of us are one or two paychecks away from homelessness. And it's how do we come up with a better plan to work with those individuals? We many times our society has stigmatized the unsheltered as either being all mentally ill or substance abuse. And I think and because of that we wanted to give very short stride in how we deal with them. And I think we need to shift all of that, because I think as a society, I think we judge ourselves based on how the least of us actually make it, not how the best of us do it. So I'm really for strengthening our middle class as much as possible, providing for a better transition for those that are experiencing homelessness into more supportive shelters, supportive housing. So that really is what prompted me to do this. Is I really wanted to be a part of the solution. I saw the numbers continuing to grow. I saw the encampments continuing to grow. And it's like, how do we fix this?
Yeah, and for those of you guys that are not from Arizona, like my family, we've been there since the 1800s. You've met my father, and we've been there for a very long time. And I will say, even in the past year or so, I've never seen this many displaced people just out there. It was kind of turning into what I was used to seeing in Los Angeles, which was kind of eye
Correct.
opening for me. Then at the same time, you have Phoenix just booming during the pandemic. And then our District 8, became just the place where everyone decided to build houses. So
Mhm.
then we had an influx of thousands of things happening. Where I'm at, the Thunderbird Country Club Estates, we ended up going through about 6 or 7 dynamite detonations that we just couldn't seem to put a stop to. That caused some problems. Obviously, these were homes built in the '60s, and these were very sizable explosions. So how are you able to manage, or I should say, balance the different needs among your constituents? You have homelessness, you have the housing boom.
Well, I think that's one of the for me, that's like I said, bringing collaboration, because I realized that District 8 is such a diverse district. I have Levine, which has more of a, they want to keep that rural feel while having some development. We have the South Phoenix area, which has more historically been a minority hub. You have the new and builds in South Mountain, and it really, and I have the airport in downtown. Like, it really is about understanding. I try to make decisions based on the individuals that are most affected,
Mhm.
because I can't just say that District 8 as a whole wants X. I think it's more about focusing on what those residents, that community needs, and then stepping back and seeing, does it fit with the general plan or a more comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
So that has been my response. That's how I've been generally doing it, is talking to the individuals that actually live there, not the not those that are coming in and have an opinion about everything. It's like, are you really affected by this decision, and how does it affect you, and tell me why you feel this way. And sometimes I've learned, having conversations with those affected, you realize sometimes that there is some misconception, there is some miscommunication. I can take that opportunity to try and clarify that, and move and help bring some clarity to the issues that are on hand. Not all of the things sometimes will be popular, but sometimes it's about having a bigger picture, having a bigger perspective, and keeping with what I consider to be my core principles. Like, for example, I believe that we need more housing because we have a supply and demand issue here, and that has led to the increase in housing costs. But at the same time, there are some people who believe that there should be no more development. We should kind of treat the city as closed. I don't necessarily agree with that. So there's very little I can budge on that, but I can find where I think are areas where development makes sense. So
Yeah,
it's about just, yeah,
yeah. I
sorry.
was just gonna say, yeah, yeah. I get it. It's just I was hoping we'd get a Whole Foods. You know what I'm saying? Not 7 housing communities. We just became so like Cody Williams was a previous councilman who introduced these developers to our hidden gem near South Mountain. We were just back there, handful of houses, golf course, quail, rabbits. Next thing you know, it's the hottest ticket in town, unfortunately. And so I had hoped that we would develop in a more balanced way to where, I could walk to the corner and have a grocery store rather than having to walk 2 miles just to get down to baseline to go to the fries, the same fries I've been going to my entire life that is never really renovated and never really brought us any decent meat or produce. So it's like, even though we had these custom homes back here, we were still treated as if we were in a poor area. And so I was hoping that that would change, but we didn't see that change, and we saw that get worse under the previous incumbent. And now, we've got these new houses that are coming in, but what can we do to sort of balance things out now that there's no more parcels left? We're not going to be able
Yeah.
to get a Whole Foods. We're not going to be able to have a Sprouts.
Yeah, so that is one of the that is one of the realities that we're living, that we're kind of not stuck with, but we have to acknowledge that many of the parcels have been zoned for a certain type of development. But the city is taking input. They're looking at the ones that are city owned, parcels that remain in the area, as well as they are looking at just a general plan. And the general plan, I won't say in general, but the plan that dictates the development of the city. Every 10 years, we do that. And that is in the process of being done. So I'm literally encouraging all of the residents to participate in that process so that they do hear your voice. One thing I will say, that other communities do a better job of making sure that their concerns are heard than sometimes you do see in the South Phoenix area. And I really want to change that. I want to inform and educate individuals on how to do that. And I want to reinvigorate our input in the community and when it comes to the government and how we deal with things. So I think it is still a possibility. We can work with the developers that are. We can let them know that this is the interest. This is what individuals want. So
Yeah,
instead of considering another fries or a gas station, or can we work on a sit down restaurant? Can we work on more of healthier food options? And I mean, before the response was we didn't have enough rooftops with the proper right amount of disposable income. I think we can safely say has changed tremendously.
yeah, the developers became the banks, and so they pretty much said, "Hey, we can get you in a house, no problem." So for other attorneys considering running for office someday, what advice would you have based on your journey?
Let's see, what advice? So let's start off with a thing I didn't like the most. My least favorite part about campaigning was the financial component of it. To run a campaign requires finances, and the way that it's traditionally done is you got to set aside call time and talk to people, and what they call dialing for dollars. So um, it's okay. You got to be prepared to not get some phone calls back or not have some people call you back. But I think you start, like they'll tell you, start off with people that know you. And I think that's how you get your momentum going. So start with individuals that know you and know who you are and your skill set. It goes back to my whole notion of networking. um, Let those individuals be your original branch of networking, getting your word out. um, Come up with what you think are, and I would say make sure you have your ideas of policy, of the things that you want to focus on in your role, because you will get a lot of individuals wanting to sell their vision and what they think you should do, and you definitely want to stay true to yourself in doing this. What else would I tell you? I would tell you it's an interesting. It's similar to what we do. It's a different way of advocacy. So I think and I think now you'll understand why so many like people in Congress or our representatives are lawyers, because it's naturally a skill set that we develop as lawyers, and that's to advocate for our position, because that's what you're doing when you're advocating for policies with other individuals. You're telling them why they should buy into your vision. So I would say, if you're the more the merrier. I think lawyers bring an interesting skill set, but I'm biased to this, and I think we're effective at this. So I say,
Okay,
do it. I'm like
perfect.
19. Yeah.
Yeah, just do it. I commend you. I as a talent agent, I know exactly what you're going through on the regular, and yeah, I have a quick temper, so I'll admit that I clap back. So I commend you for doing what you
There
do.
are days you want to. There are days you want to, and I always remind myself that's exactly what they want. Especially uh, uh, being an African American woman, sometimes they have expectation on how we should and should not behave. And sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna change it up on you. I'm not gonna feed into this. I'm going to actually make you reconsider who you are, and put it back on you in a very slightly uncomfortable way. So it's about empowerment.
Cool. Is there anything else that you want to put out there that maybe I didn't ask? I know I asked a lot, but I could have missed something.
No, I would just to the law students that are watching this, you are capable of doing it. Doesn't matter what your grades may say. It means it's about your passion. So if your passion is in there, just keep pushing along with it. Law school is not meant to um, reflect who you are as an individual. It is simply a scoring technique. So if you, as long as you have the passion, keep pushing for it. Because I know many times people get discouraged while in law school. So I just wanted to share a little encouragement.
Awesome. All right, so this is Kesha for Phoenix, and this is an article about her in Arizona Central, where it says Hodge Washington is the first Black woman elected to the city council, and starting April 17th, when she and District 6 council member-elect Kevin Robinson are seated, the council will for the first time have 2 Black members. Hodge Washington's victory also represents a win for Black organizers in South Phoenix, who for decades successfully pipelined candidates to the District 8 seat. Their playbook fell apart, however, in 2013 when Kate Gallego, now the mayor, defeated Warren Stewart Sr. for the spot, and again in 2019 when Garcia defeated Michael Johnson. And I'll come back just to say, you know about that Gallego tea, right?
I have heard some stuff.
Perfect. Kesha, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been Bridging the Gap, and till next time.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your evening.